Well, good morning. My name is Aaron Nesbitt. I'm one of the pastors here at our Goshen campus. Excited to be able to worship with you this morning and celebrate some baptisms. It's been a great morning, and we are going to continue on here. But before we get on to the message, I did want to draw your attention to something maybe you've already noticed. If you look at your program, there's actually no room for notes. There is just so many awesome things that we wanted to make sure you were aware of that are going on so you can get plugged in to them and help us out with a couple different things. One thing, though, in particularly that I want to point out to you is that we are having an Ash Wednesday service. If that's something you are interested in, and we're even providing childcare, but sign-ups close for that tonight. So if you are wanting to take advantage of that and have childcare, you'll want to sign up for that. It's going to look a little different than a typical service, a little bit more solemn and liturgical as we kick off the season of Lent. So if you want to be a part of that, make sure you sign up tonight. Well, we are moving on in our Come and See series where we've been walking through the book of John. And last week, Drew taught through the story of where Jesus healed the man who had been blind from birth. And how that story in that instant was supposed to point to people and their spiritual blindness, the blindness of the heart. He was speaking to the religious leaders and the Jews of that day. And so we move on today into John chapter 10. And John chapter 10 goes a little like this. It says, "I tell you the truth, anyone who sneaks over the wall of a sheepfold rather than going through the gate must surely be a thief and a robber. But the one who enters through the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep recognize his voice and come to him. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. After he has gathered his own flock, he walks ahead of them, and they follow him because they know his voice. They won't follow a stranger. They will run from him because they don't know his voice." Those who heard Jesus use this illustration didn't understand what he meant. So he explained it to them. "I tell you the truth, I am the gate for the sheep. All who came before me were thieves and robbers, but the true sheep did not listen to them. Yes, I am the gate. Those who come in through me will be saved. They will come and go freely and find good pastures. The thief's purpose is to steal and kill and destroy. My purpose is to give them a rich and satisfying life. I am the good shepherd, and the good shepherd sacrifices his life for the sheep." So the story is kind of based out of a sheep-shepherd relationship. And I look out in this crowd, and I don't see many shepherd staffs or rods, unless you left them out by the coat rack. We probably don't have too many shepherds in here. I don't know too much about, or I know more now, about the sheep and shepherd relationship. And so, in fact, my experience was limited with farms. In fact, specific to sheep, my experiences were just with the Elkhart County 4-H Fair. Walking through Young McDonald's farm or the sheep barn there at the fair. And honestly, when I'm at the fair, my focus is more on making sure I'm not losing one of my children or on getting an elephant ear. And so I don't retain too much of the information that I've gleaned from the fair when it comes to sheep. But so, we do a little bit of research here to understand this passage a little more. But obviously, sheep were used for basic things like food. They were used for clothing. Their wool would have been used for clothing, and they were used for sacrifices at the time. They would have been used for sacrifices in the religious actions. But we look at stories in the Bible, and this sheep-shepherd relationship would have been a great depiction, an illustration to use to the group that Jesus was talking to. It was so prevalent and integral to the time. We look at stories in the Bible like Job, who had 7,000 sheep. Or we look at 2 Chronicles, where Solomon sacrificed 120,000 sheep and goats. It was very commonplace, and it was a very great example for them to understand. And so this morning we're going to have something I call Sheep Culture 101, or I prefer Ba'ology, just to give us a better understanding of this passage when we read it. And so with Sheep Culture 101, there's 3 Ds that we need to make sure that we know. The first is that the sheep have a relationship of dependency. they depend on the shepherd. They depend on the shepherd for food. While they might be able to find a patch of grass, the shepherd knows where the best grass is, and eventually they'll run out, and he knows where to go for the next patch. For water, the shepherd's going to lead sheep to water, a good water source, a good clean water source where they can drink. They also need sheared. That's something a sheep can't do on its own. Its wool's going to keep growing. They don't shed. It can grow. It actually weighs them down. It makes them a prime target for a predator. And they will overheat in the summer if the wool gets too thick as well. And so that is the first D, is that there's a relationship of dependency. The second is that sheep are defenseless. They're pretty much like a meal on legs, just sitting in a field, waiting to get devoured. And so sheep are defenseless. They're defenseless against the elements, whether it be storms, they don't have shelter, or mudslides that might happen in the area. They are defenseless. They're defenseless against predators, so like wolves or thieves. Back in the Bible times, thieves would often steal sheep. And in the Bible times, thieves really had it hard, actually. I mean, like, they had to steal 2 sheep. If they wanted one, they had to steal 2. They'd have to steal the first one for food or to sell, whatever they wanted it for. And they'd have to steal the second one to sacrifice for stealing the first one. But sheep are defenseless. And so they need someone to protect them. There's rivers that could get pulled downstream, and there's cliffs that they could fall off. And so because of that, shepherds would often make a sheepfold. And a sheepfold looks like here on the screen. It was pretty much a makeshift pen. Sometimes it would be sturdy like this with stones, or it could be just brush that they make into an enclosure, or it could be a cave that's already there with just one opening. The whole point here was to have one opening, so the sheep could go in and not come out. There'd be either a gate there, or there'd be a hired hand, a gatekeeper, to be at the doorway to make sure nothing was going in and no sheep were coming out, or there'd be a shepherd across the gateway to sleep there to make sure nothing was going in. I work with the youth here, with the students, and I'll tell you what, I do the same thing with our students. When we have a lock-in or anything like that, I end up sleeping right in front of the door, separating the guys from the girls. For protection. And so that same idea is what a shepherd would do. And so the sheepfold sometimes would actually have more than just one owner, one shepherd's sheep. It could be either for one individual, or it could be for a whole community. So it could be a lot of different sheep from a lot of different flocks all gathered into a sheepfold. But they would put them there to protect them. At night, there could be predators, or they could wander off. And so this was for their protection. And the third D that we're going to talk about is that sheep are dumb. They're dumb. They're actually not unintelligent. They get focused on their appetite and let that drive them. Which I might not be very bright then if that's the case too. But what a sheep does, it'll actually find a patch of grass and it'll just, chow down. And then it will move from that patch to the next patch, so on and so forth, until it finally looks up and it sees that it has wandered completely off from the rest of the flock. So for that, we're going to say sheep are dumb. So there you go. You guys have passed Sheep 101. Congratulations. Good job. Gold star. There you go. Now we can kind of work through this passage together a little bit. So when we start back at the top where it says, I tell you the truth, anyone who sneaks over the wall of a sheepfold rather than going through the gate must surely be a thief and a robber. But the one who enters through the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. So when we think about that sheepfold, right, there's one opening, and that's where the shepherd would go. A thief would go over the top and try to sneak and steal or kill a sheep. That's what this passage is talking about. And in this passage, we're introduced to 3 different categories. We're introduced to thief, also known as the robber, the sheep, and the shepherd. Now, before we dive in too deep to this passage, we have to remember that Jesus was talking to the religious leaders of the day. That's the audience that he's talking to. And we know that the Pharisees, they were adding extra steps. They were so focused on the law that they wanted to make sure that there was like these buffer laws around it to ensure people were not breaking God's commandments. Pharisees looked at what God had said about following his commandments, and they realized that they kept on finding themselves persecuted. They kept on finding themselves exiled out of their own land, or other countries and just religions coming in and being a part, and they're wondering, why is this happening? Why does this continue to be a thing? And so they assume that it must be because they are not keeping the law good enough. So they double down, and they get into this like enough is enough mindset. See, they would read passages like Deuteronomy 11:22 that says this. It says, "Be careful to obey all these commands I am giving you. Show love to the Lord your God by walking in his ways and holding tightly to him. Then the Lord will drive out all the nations ahead of you, though they are much greater and stronger than you, and you will take over their land." They would hear that passage and they think that, okay, well, to cling to the Lord is to cling to the command, to the law. But while they were clinging to the law, they were totally missing the fact that Jesus was Lord right in front of them. So they clung to the law, and they ended up making laws on top of laws, and then persecuting and making fun of those that couldn't keep up. They would ridicule those that were not able to keep the laws that they made. So knowing all of this about them, we can kind of understand in this passage where it's going, in that they are the thieves and the robbers. They are the ones trying to act and achieve and get over this law of a wall. See, the Pharisees added those extra steps, and they focused all on that. They didn't go through the gate. They weren't focused on the gate. And anyone who believes that they can enter the sheepfold by that way is completely wrong, and that's an illegitimate way to do it. In verse 3, the gatekeeper opens the gate for him, the shepherd, and the sheep recognize his voice and come to him. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. After he has gathered his own flock, he walks ahead of them, and they follow him because they know his voice. And they won't follow a stranger. They will run from him because they don't know his voice. So here is where our Sheep Culture 101 really starts to pay off. We start seeing this relationship of dependency start to unfold. The sheep recognize his voice, and they come to him. So the sheep know the shepherd. They know him because they went past him to get in the sheepfold. They know him because he's looked out for them. He shaved their wool. Like he has cared for them and tended to them. They recognize his voice because there's a relationship there. There's an understanding of his role in their relationship. He calls his sheep by their own name, and he leads them out. See, their relationship was on a first name basis. And everyone wants to be known. Everyone wants their name known, and that's not necessarily wrong, right? Everyone has that desire to be known. I know for me, when I think about that, like I think about in football when I was in high school, anytime I'd get into a new year and I have new coaches, one of the very first things you do in football is you start these 2-a-day practices. And they would take this big piece of tape and they would plaster it on the front of your helmet, and they'd write your name with a Sharpie, your last name, right on your helmet. And my goal, and I'm sure the same goal as many others, was that by the end of the first practice, I wanted to make a play good enough that they would remember my name. Or I wanted to encourage someone that they knew my name. But I wanted my name to be known. But that's based off of, my action or my merit. For the sheep, the shepherd knows the sheep based on who he is, not by what the sheep can do. This relationship is special. It's not on the achievement that a sheep can do. It's who the shepherd is. There's a deep connection between the shepherd who leads, protects, and provides for his sheep. In preparation for this message, I kind of came across a story that's from World War I, where these soldiers were starving. They were needing some food. And so they had this idea to go to a pasture. And there was just a ton of sheep. And so these soldiers start trying to corral these sheep. And they start pushing and prodding and pulling these sheep. And the shepherd sees this, and he just gives them some time to do it. And they're pushing and prodding. And they end up getting worn out. They're just so weary and tired from having to do all this pulling that he sees his time, and what he does is he just decides to call his sheep. He calls them. And his sheep immediately, all at once, start just running towards him. And there was nothing that the soldiers could do about it. They knew who their shepherd was. Next in this passage, we see confusion again, which we have seen throughout John, where they need Jesus to repeat something a second time because they're just not getting it. So in verse 6, those who heard Jesus use this illustration didn't understand what he meant. So he explained it to them. I tell you the truth, I am the gate for the sheep. All who came before me were thieves and robbers, but the true sheep did not listen to them. Yes, I am the gate. Those who come in through me will be saved. They will come and go freely and find good pastures. The thief's purpose is to steal and kill and destroy. My purpose is to give them a rich and satisfying life. So all of a sudden, the religious leaders then can understand the story that Jesus is saying, that he is the shepherd and they are sheep. But Jesus clarifies that there are true sheep, and by process of elimination, if there's true sheep, everyone else would be false sheep. And I think that's something we have to ask ourselves. If we are true sheep, who are we listening to? Who are we letting influence our lives around us? Are we listening to other sheep? Are they true sheep? Is the advice that they're giving us, is that something that a true sheep would say? Are they pointing to the shepherd? Because it's through him and him alone that we enter the kingdom. We've got to ask ourselves, am I letting the shepherd lead me? Or am I letting him tell me where to go? Where am I supposed to be eating and feeding from? Or am I choosing my own way to go? We see it explained this way in a couple chapters in John 14:6. I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Jesus is saying, there's not another way. You can't act your way in. You can't obey the law enough. There's no other way to get into the sheepfold than coming through me. That is what Jesus is trying to get through to them. If a sheep is banking on anything other than going through Jesus, they are illegitimate. They are a false sheep waiting on a shepherd that's never going to come. You know, as we saw that sheepfold, there's lots of sheep in there. But they were specific to a flock, specific to a shepherd. They will be left behind in the fold, dumb, defenseless, and dependent on themselves, while Jesus leads the true sheep out. See, in the true sheep, there's so much to benefit from being a sheep under the care of the good shepherd in Jesus. There's so much to benefit from that. The first is that he knows their name, and it's not by anything we do. It's not our good actions, it's not our bad actions. It's because of who he is and our relationship to him. Isaiah 53:6 says, all of us, like sheep, have strayed away. There's times in our lives where we just started focusing on a patch of grass that we liked. And it moved us to another patch, and another patch, and another patch. And somewhere along the line, we looked up, and we realized we've wandered a little bit too far off. We're eating crabgrass. We're eating just junk. We don't have the good stuff. The stuff that Jesus wants for us. And that voice is super faint. But it's there. If we're under the care of Jesus as the shepherd, we can make our way back. We just have to listen to that voice. True sheep follow his lead. We have an example in our shepherd of what to do and where to go. That's a benefit to being one of his sheep. See, true sheep don't live in a pen. We're not pigs. We don't wallow in the mud. We don't eat slop. Our shepherd sends us out to green pastures, to fresh water. See, the sheep to the sheepfold should be like the Christian to the church. It's great. It is awesome that we get to come together Sunday after Sunday, and we get to come together in close proximity, in community. That is awesome. But we aren't supposed to live here, and we should only be on when we're here. We should be following our shepherd out into the world and into the community. We should be sharing our hope that we have as true sheep with the sheep that don't have him as a shepherd. Accepting them into the flock and pointing to our shepherd. It's worship and service. Others could see the hope that you have in Jesus, and that could be what they need to meet him. Lastly, true sheep find life. They find real, true life. The things that everyone is looking for, things like intimacy, protection, community, identity, purpose, those are all found when you are a true sheep under the care of Jesus. You just have to look for them through him. And this came at a cost, but not a cost that you or I had to pay. Because while the world asks of you, Jesus acts for you. That's the Good Shepherd. See, in John 10:11, he says this, he says, I am the good shepherd, and the good shepherd sacrifices his life for the sheep. That's the relationship. And we shouldn't take that lightly. We shouldn't be so quick to forget. The psalmist says this best in chapter 23. The Lord is my shepherd. I have all that I need. He lets me rest in green meadows. He leads me beside peaceful streams. He renews my strength. He guides me along right paths, bringing honor to his name. Even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me. Your rod and staff protect and comfort me. You prepare a feast for me in the presence of my enemies. You honor me by anointing my head with oil. My cup overflows with blessings. Surely your goodness and unfailing love will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will live in the house of the Lord forever. Let's pray. Father God, we thank you so much for sending us the Good Shepherd, who shared this story to give us an idea and an understanding of what he has in store for us. We thank you so much for letting us join the flock and being a true sheep. I pray that we are reminded daily of how we entered this flock, Lord, and that is through Jesus and Jesus alone. I pray that as we move out to our pastures, as we move out into our world, as we see sheep that do not understand this yet, Lord, that we see other people that don't know Jesus as their shepherd, that we can help encourage them in some way, that you can be known through something we can do through that. We love you so much, and we are so thankful for all that you do for us. Pray all this in Jesus' holy name. Amen.
Hi, my name is Kara Grove. Thanks so much for watching our video. If you'd like to see more like it, you can visit us at riveroaks.org or check us out on social media. We'd like to invite you back to join us this Sunday at 9 or 10:30 a.m. for our services here at River Oaks in Goshen.